In this lecture, we'll be talking about the completion of Descartes', or most of the completion for Descartes' proof of foundational knowledge. So before we begin, I want to remind us where we left off. Where we left off with Descartes was that he had said, look, I'm looking for a firm foundation of first principles upon which I can build a system of belief and knowledge that is sure and firm and certain. And in engaging in his method of doubt, he's doubted all of sense knowledge, all of his senses of a posteriori reality, as well as a priori knowledge through the evil genius doubt. Now, Descartes says, look, if I am entirely doubting requires thinking, and if there's thinking, there's a thing that thinks, therefore, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. I am the thing that is thinking. But from this cogito, what else do I know? Well, Descartes says, I have these certain sorts of perceptions or ideas, thoughts, that are what he calls clear and distinct. And it's from this clarity and distinction, the clear and distinct perceptions, that Descartes is going to, one, prove God's existence in his own way, and two, to build back his system of knowledge so that he can engage in a scientific practice. So now that Descartes has clear and distinct perceptions, like for instance, that body is extended, remember the melting candle, or that mind is intentional, it's imagination and emotion and thought, he wants to turn these kinds of clear and distinct perceptions, which also include the cogito, into knowledge. So Descartes will be able to help himself to this inference that if I have a clear and distinct perception, then I have knowledge, after proving the following claim. So first, he's going to try to prove that clear and distinct perceptions are his epistemically most impressive perceptions. Two, he's going to try to show that he can clearly and distinctly perceive a non-deceiving God. And three, that whatever Descartes clearly and distinctly perceives is guaranteed by God to be true. So let's start with one. Descartes gives a phenomenological description of clear and distinct judgments, which is that they illuminate the ideas that are their content. So there's no obscurity or confusion. There's no possible doubt in a clear and distinct perception. So Descartes also gives an epistemic characterization, such as like epistemic virtue, for the clarity and distinction of perceptions or thoughts, in that they are indubitable. So there's a certain sort of virtue to having a clear and distinct perception, which is when Descartes thinks them, he can't help but to feel that they are certain. So when Descartes clearly and distinctly perceives certain facts, he's never been proven wrong about such facts. And so as far as Descartes knows, clear and distinct perceptions are his best candidate for knowledge. And until a proof against them comes along, Descartes is just going to take them for granted that they are true. Now, this might lead into some future problems for circularity, but for now, let's ignore those. So some important features of clear and distinct perceptions, thoughts, ideas, is that one, they're doubt resistant, that when Descartes thinks them, he can't help but to feel certain about them, even if there were some sort of doubt to be brought into the experience of clear and distinct perception, which Descartes has never had. He still couldn't help but to be certain of them. They offer sort of cognitive luminance, that they feel clear, that it's like when you have a really perfect and clear fidelity in vision or in some other perception, that there's a certainty to what you see or what you hear or what you feel, given the luminance, the clarity and the fidelity of that perceptual experience. Likewise, there's a phenomenological sort of quality of luminance in cognition when you have a perception that's clear and distinct. So how do we get clear and distinct perceptions that are doubt-resistant and cognitively luminous to rise to the level of knowledge? So it's at this point that Descartes needs to prove God's existence. And the way he does that is by giving an ontological proof. So an ontological proof for God's existence, there's all sorts of them throughout the history of philosophy. They all depend upon the nature and often the idea of God in order to prove God's existence. So here's the example. Imagine that you are babysitting a toddler and you give that toddler a box of crayons and a piece of paper and you put them in a playpen so they're perfectly safe and they're just going to sit there and draw, you hope. And you go into the other room to make a grilled cheese for their lunch. You come back and you find not some child drawing of a house and 3 stick figures holding hands, but this diagram, let's say it's of a rocket engine. I don't actually know what the diagram is of, but let's assume that it's like a space rocket engine. if you just left the kid in there with the crayons and a piece of paper, how do you think that diagram got there? Did the kid actually draw this rocket ship engine diagram? It's a 2, 3, 4-year-old. It seems impossible. Descartes says, look, what sort of cause is required for such a blueprint to exist? Well, a cause sufficient to explain the nature of the effect, meaning the baby, the toddler, is insufficient to explain is insufficient to have caused the blueprint. In order to make a rocket ship, you need to be a rocket scientist, and you need more than crayons, you need more than just paper, you need all of the stuff of blueprint engineering. So likewise, Descartes asks, well, what of the idea of God? He analogizes, I mean, it's not an analogy, but the analogy is something like the idea of God as an all-perfect, infinite being is like in the head of a human, is like the rocket diagram in the playpen of the toddler, that it doesn't seem that the toddler could have put it there. So says Descartes. So Descartes then concludes, if we have this perception of an infinite and all-perfect God, and humans are finite and not perfect, then we can't have been the cause of that idea. Rather, that idea must be caused by something sufficient to explain the nature of its effect, and the only thing sufficient, says Descartes, to explain this infinite idea of God and a perfect being is a God and a perfect being. So here's a nice quote, that the cause of an idea must have as much reality as the reality found in the idea. This is sort of the Cartesian line here. My idea of God contains infinite reality, therefore the cause of this idea contains the infinite reality. But only God has infinite reality, therefore only God can cause my idea of God to be that, and therefore God exists. So Descartes can't have caused the idea himself, so he says, thus the proof for God's existence. The idea of God is innate, that from the position of the method of doubt, and at the point of the cogito, Descartes is able to perceive that body is extension, mind is intention, and I have this idea of God, and that idea is wholly perfect. So a clear and distinct perception of God cannot be deceived as true because God is the most perfect sort of infinite thought, says Descartes. And so it must be true if perceived clearly and distinctly. And the reason for this is that if such a perfect, omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent God were the cause of the idea, then to be deceived about having that idea and that idea is actually false would be kind of evil that would be inconsistent with the sort of God that is the content of the idea. So the content of the idea as being all perfect makes it impossible for that idea to be a matter of deception. And if Descartes clearly and distinctly perceives the conception of an infinite and perfect God that makes doubt impossible, then Descartes has found his first real bit of knowledge. So if Descartes knows that God exists, and this is his firm and solid foundation from which he's going to build the rest of his superstructure of belief and knowledge that follows, then the rest of the project is just to extrapolate that knowledge and that inferential structure from his firm, solid foundation to everything else. And let's not forget, Descartes was first and foremost a scientist, and he was interested in doing and engaging in the new mechanical science and in finding a way to justify the social world of the time and his theological convictions with this novel practice to move beyond an old way of thinking and an old way of doing science poorly to doing science in the new way and making that new way consistent with his other theological convictions. And so this is how Descartes begins the project of rebuilding knowledge back into his life and into his society.